Everybody awake? Okay. I cannot recommend dropping your iPhone from 20 meters. It acts weird, like not being able to disable. No. Okay, so welcome to my session about Composer in general and more specifically how we integrated Composer support into TYPO3 itself, but also established Composer support in the whole TYPO3 ecosystem. If you have any questions during this session, please don't hesitate and just directly raise your hand or jump up or grab a microphone, whatever. Just interrupt me and ask your question, or if something is unclear to you, whatever. So yeah, feel invited. If you have questions after the talk, you have multiple ways to reach me. Most of the time, this is the keyword how to reach me. So this is my nick on Twitter. This is my nick on Slack, the TYPO3 Slack. This is basically in any social network except Snapchat. So yeah, just except Snapchat, you can reach me probably everywhere by that. So, Composer, magic word. Who of you never heard of Composer? Okay, that's great. Who of you already uses it on a daily basis? Oh, that's also great. Who plans to use it on a daily basis? Awesome. Okay. So, probably I don't have to spend too much time on that, so you know what it is. It's basically a command line tool, right? So you're doing stuff on the command line. And what are you going to achieve on the command line? You're installing packages. And if this package has a dependency to another package, you get all the dependencies installed, and they are on your hard drive then. So that's also true, of course, for TYPO3, complete TYPO3 projects, including TYPO3 extensions. And there's one central package repository in the Composer world where all the libraries are, the Doctrine libraries and Zend framework and Symfony and stuff like that. And also TYPO3 CMS is there. So Composer can talk to this central place and download the specific versions of these libraries you want to have and its dependencies. And if you are a library developer, you can go there and register your package just by providing a URL to Git repository. Or even, I think it also works with SVN repositories if you want to do that, but cannot recommend. But there's also one thing that's not mostly forgotten, that's not true, but you mostly don't need to care about, because if you use things like TYPO3, it is taken care about already for you. It's the class loading. So if we would just had a package repository and packages installed, and all these packages bring classes, and all these packages have a different way or different conventions how the classes are put into there, how the file names are. If this would be the case, Composer would be a lot less useful, right? So what the Composer people did in coordination with the framework interoperation group, the FIG, they defined standards how autoloading should be or could be in the future. And in the future is already now, so many projects adopted these standards. So that if you install packages with Composer, you only have to do one thing to be able to load all the classes. Who can explain that to me or to us? What do you have to do in your project that all your classes are autoloadable? Just nobody? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Exactly. So what you explained right now is what you have to do as a library owner that your classes are made available. What my point was, if you have a project and want to use Composer, you just have to say Composer install, and then in your top level script you do one line, one important line, and that is require vendor autoload.php. So basically you require one file, and then your autoloading magically works for any class. So that's also true for a type 3 project. If you set it up correctly, all the classes are just there, and you don't need any other autoloader. So that's basically, I mentioned that only because that's basically one major thing that we changed in TYPO3 version 7.6. So who of you remember the 7.6 times, or even the previous times before that? Or let's take 6.2 times, sorry, with class autoloading and class caches. Who had issues with the class cache in 6.2? Okay, right. So the main problem was there, not that the class loader code was bad or whatever. The main issue we had there was that we tried to generate the information or assume the information where classes and files are on runtime. Yeah, right? The application starts up. We don't know where classes are, require some base classes because we couldn't proceed otherwise. So basically we had code in there like that, 20 lines with require general utility, require class loader, require class alias, blah, 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 blah. And then we initialize things, and then we load extension information during runtime. And because this is expensive, we do extensive caching and put everything somewhere. And then most of the information is stored in the cache, but not every information. So it could happen that an extension only needs a class when you really have the plugin on the page, for example. So if we load the page, then 3 additional classes are stored in the cache, and stuff like that. So that was one thing, and the other thing was that we couldn't detect if the cache is complete or not, right? So we loaded everything on runtime, so we didn't know, okay, do we have complete information here? Yes, no, I don't know. And the worst thing was that if that cache was incomplete, it could happen that some things failed. So one request failed, and another one worked. So what we learned in the first place from Composer, that this is just a wrong approach. We don't want to spend so much time during runtime. We have a lot other more important stuff to do for, like content management. So we don't want to deal with finding the classes on runtime. And this is a major thing that we consequently changed for TYPO3 version 7.6. If you install or set up your TYPO3 project with Composer, Composer does everything for you in the moment you type Composer install. And then everything is there, and we removed tons of requires in our early bootstrap because of that. So that was great. So we had Composer working if you install it with Composer, but what about the other people, right? So there are a lot of people out there who haven't heard, or probably heard from Composer, but didn't really know how to use it, and were a little bit, okay, it's command line, I don't know, I'm comfortable with the other way of setting up TYPO3. So what we did there is some kind of mixture. It's still the TYPO3 core classes are delivered with the downloadable package. So basically what we do before we deliver the package, we check out the repository in a specific version, and then do Composer install in this repository so that we have generated classes for the TYPO3 core in that package. So if you look, who of you has taken a look in this tag.z file of the package, just unpack it, yeah, probably most. So if you unpack it, In 6.2, you only have a TYPO3 folder and an index.php and a bunch of other stuff. In TYPO3 7.6, you have a TYPO3 folder and an index.php and a vendor folder. And inside, in this vendor folder, you find all the external libraries and an autoload.php, which we include as first step. So yeah, then that's great. So TYPO3 classes are loaded, but what about extensions, right? So I go to Extension Manager and say, okay, download news, and then install news. From the Composer world, it's still kind of runtime, so it wouldn't work. What we have did then is kind of a little bit of mixture of that, being we are in this application which is already running, but still we enable plugins or extensions, how we name it, to be added to that system. And what we did is we generate additional class loading information for each extension in that case, right? So if you click on install in the extension manager, we generate additional class loading information for third-party extensions and store it somewhere else. And basically what we decided to do, I'm not quite happy about that, but that's the way it is. We store it in TYPO3 temp autoload, right? Yeah, so what that means is if you have configured your class loading, your extension in a wrong way, then it could be that the information are wrong there, and if you update, if you correct the information, it's just not reflected right away. So if you just change the autoload configuration of your extension, nothing happens. What you have to do is not clearing some caches, but deinstall the extension and reinstall it again, then the stuff is regenerated. What I cannot recommend is just deleting that folder. It works because I implemented a kind of fallback mechanism, but it's better to just go to the extension manager and say, deinstall one extension, it doesn't matter which one, and install another one, or go to the command line and say CLI dispatch, I don't know the exact command, xspace, and then extension : dump class loading information or stuff like that. All right, so that's basically what we did. So we switched the class loading from being generated, class information being generated in the runtime during the build time, how I call it. So what's also different between Composer projects, Composer-only projects, and TYPO3? That's TYPO3 has a completely different project structure. So Composer project or Composer folder structure is everything is in the so-called vendor folder, and then it has a subfolder of the vendor name of this library, and then there's another subfolder and exactly another subfolder where with the name of the library, and then the directory structure is like the library owner wants to have it, but it's always the same, and you always have vendor autoload.php and stuff like that. So if we would have gone away, for example, okay, we want to go Composer way, we install our extension in this vendor folder, which is done by default, it wouldn't have worked because TYPO3 doesn't know yet about some vendor folder. So that's a difference we needed to care about. And of course, TYPO3 also still needs some kind of information in the xdm-conf file. But if you want to install extension with Composer, there's also this Composer JSON, and it's surprisingly hard to get away from that. And basically, we have two worlds. So the extension manager needs this xdm-conf file, and that's why every extension just needs to provide it as well, even if it's duplicate information in there. For example, the author needs to be in there, and it also needs to be in the Composer JSON file. And you can read up how a Composer JSON file looks like in the Composer documentation, of course. And recently, I created a more specific specification how a composer JSON for a TYPO3 extension needs to look like. I'm not going into detail here, but the slides have a link to the wrong website, probably. I have to correct that. So it should link to the specification, because you have to do some special things or additional things in your composer JSON for your extensions. So all these differences that I mentioned, so different folder structures and stuff like that, for that to work with Composer and TYPO3, we needed to create a specific package which is called TYPO3 cms-composer-installers. And this package is there to see what packages are installed and what type of packages are they. And if this installer detects a package of type TYPO3 CMS framework, then it knows, okay, this is now my main product. I put it by default in a folder called TYPO3_SRC. And I found an extension. I don't put this extension into the vendor folder because TYPO3 wouldn't work. I put it better in the TYPO3 conf-ext folder. So this is basically what the composer installer package does. So taking care of putting the core in a specific location, putting extensions in a specific location, and creating the so-called web directory. So it's currently not by default, but it's the recommended way is that you don't have your root composer JSON in your web directory exposed. So we have all the packages in the vendor folder in one directory and have a specific directory which is called web or htdocs or public or however you want to call it. You can configure that. And in that directory, this is where your web server points to. But TYPO3 needs a special layout there. The index.php must be in there, the TYPO3 folder must be in there, and of course the TYPO3 conf folder must be in there, and TYPO3 temp and stuff like that. And the composer installer also takes care of setting up the basic web directory for you. So it creates the web folder, and it creates a symlink by default to the TYPO3 folder of your TYPO3 sources. And if you have extensions to install, then it creates the TYPO3 conf-ext folder and puts the extension in there. And it also creates a link, of course, to the index.php, the main index.php file. All right, and there's one minor implementation detail I quickly want to talk about. So TYPO3, as I said, didn't know, or still doesn't know much about Composer. But one information it really needs to have, and that is, where is the location of the magic autoload.php file, right? So it has to have access to that so that it's able to include it, that all the classes are loaded. And that's also surprisingly tricky, because you can configure the web folder, and it can contain subfolders. So you can have your project root with a vendor directory and the autoload.php in there. And in your main composer JSON, you say the web directory is stuff/blah/web. Right? So, and TYPO3 lives in web. TYPO3 only knows about this environment. It doesn't distinguish between root or web root. And then TYPO3, where should TYPO3 look for the autoload.php file? So it lives here, and we generated everything during build time. And now TYPO3 runs and doesn't have any information how to get there. And that's why we did a little trick. By placing a link to the autoload.php in the TYPO3 sources directly, because TYPO3 knows where itself lives. So the Composer installer, if you install TYPO3 with Composer, it generates a link to the autoload.php file. Just go to the, I can show you. Probably. Okay. Okay, so, and in this project, I put my TYPO3 sources into vendor TYPO3 CMS. And the installer created a vendor folder inside this, and oh, wait, and a link to the autoload.php file, which is some levels up, right? So any questions to that? Is that somehow okay? Clear. All right. So this is what the installer does, and then in our index.php we can just refer to this actual file. If you have downloaded the target set, then there actually is an autoload.php file, or the symlink by just accessing that in the tab. It's not in the TYPO3 directory, but we go into the TYPO3 directory, then one level back, and then into the vendor directory. And even if TYPO3 is a symlink, that's how it works. So you go inside the symlink and then go back. And then we can run our entire application. So this is how the index.php currently basically looks like. 2 lines, and after the first line, basically everything is class loadable, which I considered pretty awesome. All right, but as I said before, current state and previous state, we have TYPO3 extensions, and we have the TYPO3 extension repository, right? We have a lot of extensions in there which don't even have a composer.json, or meanwhile they have, or a lot of them have, but previously they didn't have a composer.json at all. And that's why some people created this, which is also a repository for packages. So it's basically our packagist, right? But this doesn't contain TYPO3 CMS, for example, but it only contains all not all, but mostly the complete TER. So every extension which is in a TER is also listed on composer-typo3.org, and thus it is downloadable or installable with Composer, which is great. I said that. So this is it will stay a while. So as long the TER stays, and this will be a few years, I guess. As long this stays, we'll have the Composer-typo3.org. But it's really, as I said before, it's really meant for the TER and for supporting legacy extensions. In the future, I don't have a slide for that. We touched this shortly in the keynote. In the future, I imagine that every extension will also be listed on Packagist. We have to sort out things there. We have to talk to people, but I'm pretty sure this will be the way to go. So Mattis already gave you, as extension developers, the advice to move your extension development for public extensions, of course, to GitHub. So I can only second that advice, because if you do so, you have all the nice integration and testing tools and a lot of code checking integrations there, and it's one of the most easy ways to connect to Packagist. So if you just go to Packagist and put the URL to the repository in there and set up some hook, and then you're basically done forever. So this will, and some extensions are already there, but this, I guess, will be the future. Okay, so I said before there are some subtle differences between if you install TYPO3 directly with Composer and if you just download the package and do the symlinking stuff. And there's this magic word or 2 words or whatever, mode. Who of you have heard of the TYPO3 Composer mode? Okay, no, not everybody, but pretty many. Who can exactly explain to me what the difference between Composer mode and other mode is? Just in, yeah. Yeah, so you're saying you don't have the extension anymore, which is mostly true, yeah? I didn't hear. Could you speak up a little bit? Okay, yeah, exactly. So two very good points. So the extension manager did not just disappear, but the extension manager is there, but some functionality in it is disabled in composer mode, which is that you can't download additional extensions, because if you would do so, composer wouldn't know about that, and then you would run into conflicts. Yes? Thank you very much. So the exact definition is composer mode is absolutely the same TYPO3. There's only one difference, and that is autoloading, class autoloading. If you install TYPO3 with composer, so if you say most basic thing would be composer require TYPO3/CMS, then our composer installers composer plugin will be downloaded, and it does stuff, and it tells TYPO3 basically that, okay, don't care about additional class loading stuff I mentioned before, because TYPO3 is installed with composer already knows everything. And that's the difference, and that is the reason why we disallow installing additional extensions. They wouldn't harm being there, but the classes wouldn't be loadable, and that would be sad, right? So the only difference between composer mode and not composer mode is that we are not looking for additional extensions being there and adding the class loading information for that. So it's completely in, classes have to be available after composer install. That's really the only difference. Everything else, we planned some other differences, but that's what it was. So basically, if you run into issues with class loading, some things aren't loaded, please check if the classes are really registered in the according autoload section if you installed it with Composer. But this also means on the same time that class loading, two things it means. Class loading is optimized in the sense that we don't have to do anything at all during runtime. So it is at least a tiny bit faster, and we put the effort in optimizing the class loading back away from us to the complete Composer and PHP community. So during the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, a lot of things happened in the Composer class loader, and it's currently, I can't imagine another optimization, but probably they will come up, how it can be further optimized. So it's really currently pretty great. And if you have a legacy project, you lack a little bit of this optimization. We still have the Composer class loader code in there, but as we are adding classes dynamically at some point and have to merge the class loading information at some point, it's a little bit of overhead. All right, questions so far? Let's look at the time. No questions, great. So, what future improvements do we have in mind which can be implemented? These ideas are, or the order of the ideas I present now are in the order of how likely are they implemented very fast. So that was complicated. So it is very likely that the first things I present will be implemented the next. So, and the last things will take quite some time. So we have quite some bug reports and reports in general we got about symlinking. So symlinks are great. They work great on Linux and Unix systems. But they also have some downsides. There are some security implications for that. So even on Unix systems, you might experience that in your web environment, you are not allowed to have symlink PHP files, for example, on certain hostings. And there's a reason for that, because it has some deeper security implications. So this is one reason. And of course, the great Microsoft product, Windows also has some issues with symlinks, not that it's not possible, but you have to have administrators' right to create them, or at least having dedicated privileges to create symlinks. And there are some cloud hosting services like Microsoft Azure, is it called like that, which don't provide the user these permissions. So basically, TYPO3 is not installable in such environments. So one goal will be, in very short term, to get rid of all the symlinking. So step one would be, is we don't link the entry script. So the entry script is the index.php, the main index.php, and the TYPO3 index.php, and there's also a third index script, which is, does anybody know? Entry script, sorry. Not from the web, but from the command line, which is CLI dispatch. It's also a central entry point into the application. So we have two entry points from the outside from a web request, which is TYPO3 index.php, and for the front end it's the index.php, and from command line we have the CLI dispatch. And we will going to generate them. Why are we going to generate them? Because at the time of Composer installation, we know where the autoload.php is. Then we don't have to do some magic symlinking of the autoload.php in the TYPO3 directory, right? So we just write it down in this entry script or in these entry scripts. And what we also gonna or have to do then, because TYPO3 isn't a symlink anymore, the TYPO3 folder, we have to, and that's the first step, the first plan, we copy every sysext, because TYPO3 expects the system extensions in TYPO3 sysext. We have to copy them around, so we have them in the vendor directory, but also for autoloading, but also in the sysext directory for having the resources available there. That sounds like overhead. It honestly is, but that's what we accept in the first step. Okay, and in the second step, what we are going to do is not moving all the stuff around at all, but having a web directory only with the generated index scripts, generated entry scripts in there, and tell TYPO3 to know about two different directories. So one directory is the TYPO3 root, which is AKA for the developers here, path site. So this will stay the same. But we tell TYPO3 there's also some second directory, which is the TYPO3 web directory. And in this web directory, only public assets from extensions will be. So basically, oh no, that's not on the slide, sorry. Basically, it's from extensions or system extensions, the folder resources public. We just, during during build time, we just write all the files in there. Just copy them. Or for during development, we could add the option to symlink them or symlink folders, because it's easier if you add additional assets, you don't have to go to the command line. So that will be a logical next step, so that you can configure TYPO3 to be more secure and, yeah, basically more secure. And only have things available in the public which are meant to be or needed to be available. And the next logical step will be that I told you before, we have all the system extensions, and if you look at the TYPO3 repository, it basically only consists of a TYPO3 sysext folder and then all the sysext in there. We have some additional files in there still, but they are mainly the entry scripts, right? That's index.php files. We have some example HDX access files, yeah, but all the files in there are mainly for Travis, for having built stuff, things like that. But for the application to run, really, it's really the TYPO3 sysext folder. And the idea for the future is that we split out, technically split out every system extension and make it available publicly as a composer package. Right? So then you can install your TYPO3. Of course, we will deliver is it here? We will still deliver TYPO3 CMS, but it will be just a meta package, what we think makes sense in general. But who is the general we are talking about? So, but it will enable you to say, okay, for my projects, I never need, I don't know, I never need, which extension? Import-export, for example. I never need import. I don't need it in my projects. So why having the code lying there and having potential issues or wasting time or whatever? So I just don't include it in my composer specification, and then I only get the stuff I want or I want to have. So you can create your own my TYPO3 CMS package, which just downloads the stuff you want. So since we generate the entry scripts and generate the web directory, that's perfectly fine and perfectly possible. Who of you, because I put it there, who of you knows what a meta package in Composer is? A package from type meta package? Nobody? Okay, it's basically also a package, but it only contains one file in there, which is the Composer JSON, and this file Composer wouldn't write anywhere. A meta package is just, it specifies requirements, but Composer doesn't put any files of this package on your hard disk. It just will be evaluated. So currently, currently the TYPO3 CMS package comes with a lot of files, and they are put in some place, but a meta package will just be the Composer JSON, and it downloads all the other packages. So that's just a box or whatever, box definition. All right, so what are the benefits for that? So I mentioned it already. The benefits is, of course, performance, but also, of course, security. So we learned from Marco Pivetta yesterday that the best thing in coding is to not code, right? Or the best code is the code that is not available in every sense. It can't have bugs and it can't have security issues. And yeah, that's one major benefit if you just install in your project only roll out what you really need and really want to have. Okay, so different topic. Who knows this file, PackageStates.php? Okay. Who has troubles with that? Okay. Yeah. So there's always the question, do I commit it in my project or do I not commit it in my project? If I'm not committed, how do I track the information if an extension is active or not active? So what does this mean anyway? So what does it mean, is an extension active or not in TYPO3 world? It means the code is there, it sits around, but TYPO3 hops over it, but ignores it. But it's still there, right? And it still needs to keep track of that, and it still has the issues that it's code, which could be buggy, whatever. It might not affect, or usually not affects your installation, but it's still there. And that's how TYPO3 projects were in the past. So especially for the system extension, we deliver a whole set of extensions, and the code is just there. It is in this folder. But we not always need it, so we don't need import-export, so we want to at least disable the import-export functionality by just clicking that button in the extension manager, but the code is still there. And in the future, especially with the subtree split thing, why do we need it? So why would I install import-export extension, a system extension, if I'm not going to use it in my project, right? So I just don't put it in my Composer JSON and be done. It's not there. So what this will enable us to do is basically get rid of that. Every package that is installed via Composer, or not every package, of course, but every extension or system extension that is installed via Composer should be there for TYPO3 being available. Yes? So the question is if we could just start doing so right now, just enabling every every package or extension in TYPO3 conf-ext? Yeah, absolutely we could. I basically also did so in my TYPO3 console stuff. So if okay, that's TYPO3 console is something different. Who knows TYPO3 console, the package? Okay, at least a few. It's a command line tool as well, and it adds some helper stuff to better deal and automate TYPO3 installations and stuff like that. And one tool is to create the package states file. And if TYPO3 and console is installed via Composer, I do exactly that. I say, okay, write the package states file, and if I don't specify anything in addition, every extension in TYPO3 conf-ext is just active. Because, yeah, like I said, why wouldn't I have that? Why wouldn't I want it that way? But I think it is a breaking change. So if we do so, people will struggle. And it's the question if we want to introduce that now or introduce it later when we have everything ready with subtree split, and TYPO3 also works that way. So I would say we will have to live with a package state and active inactive stuff at least for 8 and maybe also for 9. I don't know, I can't see in the future, but it would be great to get rid of that in 9. So that if an extension is there, then it's active, and if it's not there, it's not active. So yeah. So what as a first step, before we're going to get rid of that, would be to write the package states file on Composer install. So if you install TYPO3 with Composer, just write this file. This was planned for 7.6 already, but it wasn't too easy, unfortunately, so we skipped that. But yeah, it's perfectly possible if you have the subtree split ready, right? So if you say, I want TYPO3 CMS core and TYPO3 CMS frontend, and probably TYPO3 CMS backend, but that's it, nothing more, then only these are installed, and then we also can go to the TYPO3 sysext or whatever and activate them. Yeah, have them just active, or write the package states file to that TYPO3 knows about it. And yeah, like I said before, we could just get rid of it and say, okay, everything you installed via Composer is just active. All right, so we're getting further in time right now. And what we absolutely honestly consider as a possibility is remove the extension manager. Why? Nobody, I don't hear anybody screaming here. Wow! So the thing is, if you're installed TYPO3 with Composer, the extension manager is, yeah, like we said before, really much less useful. So you only activate or deactivate the extension, and what happens then as well is the database compare, tables are added, and folders are created and stuff like that. Do you want to say that? Or? Okay, yeah, so the question is, if we remove the extension manager, where do we put the extension configuration? So the easy answer is somewhere else. Yeah, no, it sounds funny, but I don't know. Every time I have to access extension configuration in code, I really think so, okay, unserial, why? Why? So yeah, we had already a lot of ideas in that area. It is in the extension manager because it's a UI thing, so we have to transfer the UI somewhere else. But conceptually and technically, we need to make it right, the extension configuration somehow, configuration management in general. Yeah, but there's another thing with removing the extension manager, yeah?
Last question. Your current code, sometimes you have to deactivate and activate an extension, of course, autoloading, etc. If you remove the extension manager, you have to
Yeah, absolutely. So this question was, how about doing the database compare and creating folders, and where does this go? This has to happen. So the answer there is it also goes elsewhere. We need a UI for that as well, or at best we do it on Composer install. After that, hook into the system and just do it automatically as well. That would be one option, but we're not talking about TYPO3 8 or 9. This is 10 or 11 or stuff like that.
It won't work.
What wouldn't work?
Doing database stuff in Composer install, because Composer does not require fully fledged installation with database.
Yeah, it depends. It really depends. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time on that, but if you're interested, I can go more deeply into my distribution because I will only roughly touch it. Because in Composer, you can call external scripts, right? After Composer installation, you have the script section, and then tell Composer, after all the class loading, class dumping stuff is done, then call the script. And we have TYPO3 CLI dispatch, blah, 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 blah. And this bootstraps TYPO3, and we can do stuff there. But the other thing is, so the extension manager is not only a thing that activates class loading and dumps or activates the extension and reads files and writes caches and makes database compare. It's also UI. It's a UI for users to click somewhere and then do stuff. And if you would just remove that and say, okay, TYPO3 users, community, here's your UI, just open terminal and then type composer install. They would say, okay, fuck you. I don't want that. So that's why we have on our agenda since I don't know how long to create a generic composer web UI, which is also surprisingly hard. Others have tried as well. Some go only half the way by calling, by having a UI, but calling the command line under the hood with exec. You can do that. Yeah. And if you want to do it the right way and just use the Composer classes and then say Composer install, then you need 20 gigs of memory. That's also not very optimal. So there are a lot of technical issues to solve in that area. But I'm pretty sure at some point in time we will solve them. And we or somebody else, I don't know. There's, I think, the Contao people. I don't remember correctly which other CMS. I think it was Contao. They already started a very big project. It has a great website, the Composer UI, general stuff for everything, not only for Contao, but having a Composer UI for just Composer projects. And they had a lot of code, and it's Angular stuff, the newest front-end techniques and whatever. But it stalled, I don't know, 1.5 years ago, last commit. So probably they run out of time or had some issues. I'm not sure. We plan to contact them and probably can join forces, whatever. But this will be, at some point, it is evident that we remove the extension manager, remove our own dependency handling code, which is by far not as good as Composer dependency handling, and write a Composer UI. And at that point, of course, we will say, okay, there's no classic mode anymore. You can't install TYPO3 with downloading some target Z and whatever, and do some symlinking. So the way would be Composer require or download whatever and do Composer install, and then everything is set up. Because we have this UI, we could even say, okay, here's this UI, we ship this as a FAR, just a single PHP archive. We ship this as a FAR, and you call it on the web this FAR, and then you put it, you upload this FAR via FTP on your server, and just access it, and then it goes through the steps. Just Composer selecting the different TYPO3 versions or additional packages, extensions, and stuff like that. And if we have that, we basically, that will be the only way how we will, install TYPO3 in the future. And again, I'm not talking about TYPO3 version not at all about TYPO3 version 8, and I'm also not talking about TYPO3 version 9. So it's really, we have to solve many issues before. So it's probably 10, 11, I don't know. And at that point, of course, we don't need TYPO3 org anymore, because at that point we don't need the legacy TR anymore, so we could remove that, and everything is on packages, and yeah, like I said. And the other vision is that we don't even have TYPO3 extensions anymore. So what is an extension? So for TYPO3, what does it add to the system? It can be a do I have it? Yeah. It can add templates, so side packages like Gigal will or just talks about. It can have TypoScript, it can have language files, it can have plugins, it can have modules. But what if you only want to add one of these? You always have to say TYPO3, okay, here's an extension. Please do stuff for me. And TYPO3 always does this stuff, no matter if it's only a template or only TypoScript or only a module. And the future we are imagining is that we just have a composer package, and this composer package somehow communicates, I have templates. And another package says, oh, I also have templates. And during composer install, we gather this information and store it somewhere during build time. Then we don't have to, we have to do even much less stuff during runtime, because currently an extension means, or having an extension in the system means TYPO3 looks into the TYPO3 ext folder. It iterates over every active extension in there. It looks if there's an X localconf in there. It executes the X localconf. Because this is expensive, it takes all X localconf and caches it somewhere. And then the from the X localconf point, no, that is one. And then it looks in other folders, are files in there, and does stuff. And it's all during runtime. And all this performance is just lost, because we're looking up files, looking up registries, stuff like that. And we're looking up files and registries which obviously can change during runtime, right? So the extension doesn't magically change if a user clicks on your website. It changes if a developer changes it. So that would be great to have some system where a plugin can provide, I don't know, with some specific file in there, say, okay, I provide templates, I provide language files, I provide one or multiple plugins. We gather that information, store it somewhere, and then it's magically available to TYPO3 at the very first line of code. So we are including the autoload.php and probably call some API, whatever, and we just know it. We don't have to do extra stuff during runtime. Yeah, and then TYPO3 will be composer only. Yay! Whatever, but yeah, as I said, so that's the plan. That's how we want to decompose certain areas and recompose them in a more modular, more efficient way, and put more stuff which we're doing during runtime to the build time, which is, at least for me, one of the main lessons I was told with using Composer. So don't use big packages, because you have a lot of issues with that, and do as many stuff during build time as possible. All right, so that would be it. We still have some minutes left. Before I'm going into showing a little bit my stuff here, are there any questions to that still? Yeah?
Matthias said yesterday the direct extensions will move to GitHub. And also all packages are available on GitHub. So what's the advantage of using Composer against GitHub modules?
So the question is, what is the advantage of using Composer in contrast to Git submodules? So I started with explaining what Composer does, and there are two things, two answers to that. So if you use Git submodules, you have to know which submodules to include and which sub-submodules to include and which depends on what. If you use Composer, you just say, I want this package, and I don't care if this package needs these 10 other packages, and one of the 10 other packages needs these 20 other packages. You just say, I want monolog. I want a logging framework. Please get it for me. So, and for submodules, you not only need to know what depends on what, but you also need to know where it is. And Packages abstracts, or Composer abstracts this as well. You only need to know the name, and the location can just change. So if I have a lot of packages already on Packages, and I changed locations for that, and it was completely transparent for users. I just went there and said, okay, the GitHub URL changed, it's now that. But users can still use helbum /typo3 console and still get the same thing. So this is one thing. And the other thing is, Composer takes care of autoloading. So if you have submodules, who loads your classes of your submodules, of your code in there? So you have to add a class loader again. So that's the main benefits of Composer in contrast to just Git submodules. Any further questions? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So the question is, what happens with having multiple TYPO3 installations having the same TYPO3 sources? So I would first start with a counter question: who has done this in projects to have one source, one TYPO3 source in multiple projects? Yes, at least some people. Who has run into troubles with that when switching the symlink and having things not working? Not so many. Okay, that's great. so that is one issue. We talked about that yesterday. So let's imagine you have, I don't know, 20 websites and one source. You switch it. Then if you switch the source, which is pretty efficient and pretty fast, you have to make sure immediately that 20 websites work. Yeah, because you cannot be sure. There can be some cache somewhere, whatever. So from that standpoint, that was always, at least from my experience, the downside of doing so. So it was great because I only had to do work, and updating updating the core was very quick. But doing the additional work for the update checking and clearing caches was added quite some overhead. So the answer to the question is, because of these issues and because also Composer doesn't work this way, so the main thing for Composer is you have you have a project and have sources in this project, and you have another project where you also need TYPO3 or monolog or whatever. You have the sources there as well, so you don't have a central library or stuff like that. You can work around a little bit around that, because you can tell Composer, please, this package, don't take from Packages. This package, please take from this other location. And you can also tell Composer, please take this package from my hard disk. It's here, right? So you can still maintain one single core for your installation. Probably it's perfectly patched, or I don't know. You have you want to have more control about that. And then you can say in the individual installations, don't use TYPO3 CMS from Packages, but use it from here. But what you still have to do then is go to the individual installations and say Composer update or Composer install or Composer update TYPO3 CMS, that it reflects the state there. So it will still work somehow. Okay, further questions? All right, so just very quickly showing my TYPO3 distribution because of two things. So one thing is because I like it very much, I want to share it. The other thing is not everything, but many things I told you what we can imagine for the future of TYPO3 regarding to Composer is already possible right now using some special tools. And I bundled these tools into a distribution, mainly my TYPO3 console, and provided as as a package. So you can go to GitHub, my nickname, and there's my favorite projects, and there's TYPO3 distribution. And it comes up with a bunch of folders and some directory layout, which is just my personal preference. But it has a composer JSON with some specialities. So for example, I not only specify that I want TYPO3 CMS, but I go into more detail. Which exact stuff do I really need from TYPO3 CMS? So I specify, in this project, I need BLOG, I need the backend user, blah, 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 blah. And this is future-proof, because in the future, I said we are going to remove, or we are going to change TYPO3 CMS and split it up so that it's possible to include individual system extensions. Then I just remove this line, and this project will still work, because these individual packages are available. And I also, like I said before, I also have a script section. So if I do composer install in this project, I just download it and say composer install, then the console is available, my TYPO3 console command line tool is available, and then I can just directly generate the package states file. So what we plan for the future that is default for TYPO3 just works already now, because I have some helper script, which is the TYPO3 console stuff. And what also partly works is a setup process. So it's not database setup. I planned that already. So, if the script detects that there's no database connection yet, that I just ask the user, okay, what kind of database connection do you want to add it here? And then I can also create a database or the tables and whatever. But currently what already happens is the folder structure is created. So TYPO3 temp is created, and with all the subfolders, and also respecting extensions. So if I have an extension adding folder, so it will also be there already. And I have certain sections where I can add other stuff, so blah, blah. Yeah, and I have some other magic in place here, which is the .env connector, where I can have project configuration of this project committed in my repository, but specific environment configuration, which differs from development machine to development machine. I don't have it. I don't have this information in my repository, but I have a specific file which is called .env, which is just placed in the project root, and I have an example here. And in this file, I specify the credentials, for example, or the name of the site, so that it's clear, okay, it's not the live site, or some other specific environment-specific things like path to the image magic stuff, or things like that. Or sometimes you need some other configuration, what domains are available, right? So I can configure some additional stuff in there. And I also created a gist for that, which is here. Yeah, I know, yeah. Just to wrap it up, there's a gist where you can see these are the few lines that are, with my distribution, needed to set up a complete project, which is already deployable via Surf. So everything is in place, and you can just type, if you use Surf as deployment tool as well, you just can type Surf deploy, and then, and you could even, you could put really that in a script and then have one line and everything is set up. If you have questions to that, just ask me after the talk. So, all right, so thank you very much. A little bit over time, 4 minutes, but yeah, thank you for being here and for listening. Ja, also. Ja, das ist